without the risk, there's no glory. And so God made men. I like to say, one of the first words out of a little boy's mouth right after, maybe dad and ball, are watch this.
Yeah.
And
Well, welcome back to Campfire Apologetics. I'm Mark Hudson, and I'm joined by Toby Sumpter. And I will, again, Toby, as we said, I'll turn it over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself. You can tell us who you are and what you do and all of the different things that you do online and, podcasts and all those things. So, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
thanks for having me, Mark. Again, yeah, my name's Toby Sumpter. I'm pastor of King's Cross Church in Moscow, Idaho. Uh, I am also one of the hosts of the Cross Politic podcast and show, part of the Fight Laugh Feast network. And I am a board member at New St. Andrews College, where I graduated in my undergrad at New St. Andrews here in Moscow. I am married, have 4 kids. My oldest got married this summer, and I think that's it. I blog at tobyjsumpter.com here and there, and you can find me on various socials with either TJ Sumpter at TJ Sumpter or Toby J Sumpter.
Right on. So you're a pastor. Did you pastor at Christ Church or
Yeah.
at yeah, Douglas Wilson's church for a bit of time,
Yes.
and
Yes.
now you're your own.
So I was associate pastor at Christ Church for 3 or 4 years,
Okay.
and then kind of post COVID, our church community has just exploded. It's grown a lot, and with a lot of folks moving here, trying to find a like-minded community, and so yeah, we had a sort of a separate campus that turned into a church plant. So this is a Christ Church plant, and we're our own independent church now, but we are still closely associated with Christ Church. I actually am still a shared elder on the Christ Church elder board,
Mm,
um, and Douglas Wilson is a shared elder on my elder board.
okay.
So we intentionally tried to keep close by doing that sort of shared elder thing. And Pastor Doug preaches for us several times a year, and I preach at Christ Church here and there, and we do Christmas Eve and Good Friday joint services.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good little community. I'm always trying to get my wife to move, and
Well, you should at
always
least come visit.
yeah, I'm always mentioning Moscow or Ogden, Utah. I'm sure you can
Right.
guess why, or
Yeah.
the Phoenix, Arizona area.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's those are all nice areas. Like I said, I was able to tour a little bit and was able to go through them too. So I've seen them. But yeah, so yeah, again, thanks for being on the show. I wanted to have an episode where where we talked about biblical manhood and masculinity, and I know that you have quite a few videos and things like that online where you get into that, and I think that's an important topic in our culture. I think we've kind of gotten away from I think we've gotten away from what a man is in general, let alone what a biblical man is. So where would you start with that? What is it what does it mean to be a biblical man?
Right. Luckily, I'm not a Supreme Court justice nominee who would say, "I don't know, I'm not a biologist." Um, but um, yeah, so I love to begin in the beginning. I love to begin in Genesis when I answer this question. God made man first, and the New Testament actually brings that up. as an important part of understanding what a man is. God formed the man first, and then formed the woman from the man,
Mhm.
and I think there's a whole bunch of theology and anthropology built into that. For God to create the man first indicates that God intended for the man to be a leader. A leader is one who goes first, comes first. Um, and with that, though, also comes a duty the woman is made from the man. So the man is the source of the woman. It says in 1 Corinthians 11, and she was created for the man, not the man for the woman. And so the man is the one that God initially gives the mission to, the dominion mandate to, the task of guarding the garden, of staying away from one particular tree in the garden, and carrying out the dominion mandate. And then God demonstrates to Adam, teaches to Adam that he is not good alone, that while all the other animals have a helper, have a mate, he does not have one. He is not good alone. God then puts him in that deep sleep, tears out one of his ribs, forms the woman from that rib, and then brings her to the man. And that, we're told, is also indicating something about what a man is for. A man is made first to lead, but also made first in order to bleed first. The very first um, uh, um, blood shed in the history of the world is shed by Adam in the creation of the woman. And so from the beginning, you have this notion of sacrificial leadership. He leads, but he leads by laying his life down. He leads by sacrificing. And it's in that sacrificial leadership that God then glorifies him and brings this woman to him, um, and and she's his glory, his crown. And so I think all of these things are entailed. What does it mean to be a man? It means to be a leader. It means to be strong. It means to use your strength for good. It means to use your strength sacrificially for the good of others, for the well-being of others, and in so doing, a man is glorified. It says in Ephesians 5 that when a that we're husbands are to imitate Christ and their love for their wives, and in imitating that love, it says that a man who loves his wife well is loving himself well, and that what he does is he beautifies and glorifies his bride. He's actually that beauty, that glory returns back to him, and he receives that glory. A wife is called a crown in Proverbs. Um, and um, and so I would say fundamentally, a man is a creature that God has created to lead, to take responsibility, to have a mission, and the accomplishment of that leadership and that mission takes place through the sacrificial use of a man's strength. The glory of men is their strength, but that strength is, think about it in every sense: emotional, intellectual, physical, spiritual, in all those ways. A man is supposed to use his strength to lead, take responsibility, provide, protect, which requires him to suffer. It requires him to lay it down for the good of others.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. So I think that's part of the problem is we have gotten away from God's word, and we do not begin with God's word on, well, really anything
Right.
in our culture, and that, produces a lot of other issues. But yeah, when it comes to understanding what a man is or what a woman is, um, I think it's pretty cut and dry. I think it's pretty easy to understand when you go to the one who created man and woman, the one that created them for a specific purpose. You go there to understand what it is that you are, and what your relationship is to the world and your children and your wife and everybody else and to God. Um, and yeah, I think the main problem is that we're not looking to Christ. We're looking to ourselves. We're looking to ourselves to try and try to figure out life. We're looking to our own kind of flawed, fallen reason and philosophies instead of what God's clear word says. And what you're saying, reminds me of in 1 Corinthians 16, 13, where Paul says, "Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." And act like men is a biblical command. Like that whole thing, be strong. That's a biblical command. So I was listening to uh, Paul Washer kind of talk about the same subject, and he was talking about I guess it was maybe a mission trip that he was on, and there was a man that was with them, and I guess they were out in a jungle or somewhere that was probably unsafe and very unfamiliar to somebody who's from America. And he was talking about how this guy was terrified of everything. He was terrified of just the jungle in general, like the animals, the snakes, the bugs, and all these things. And what he was getting at was that none of those things made him not a man. It made him more of a man, that he was there because of love. He was there on a mission trip, and he was there and willing to sacrifice his comfort and be fearful, but still stand in the face of fear because of love, because this people, or these people that they were there to tell about Jesus, it was more important that they heard about Jesus than for him to be comfortable and feel safe. And so yeah, I thought that was just uh, kind of an awesome testament to um, just love being the driving factor behind what a man does. You kind of touched on the pastor, provider, protector aspect, and it's kind of one of those things. It's like you stand in your doorway between a person trying to harm your family and your family. You're the person standing in that doorway, and given whatever circumstance it may be, you may find yourself being terrified. You might find yourself being scared, because that's probably a scary thing if that were to happen. But it's your love for your family and the call that God has given a man to protect his family and to love his wife as Christ loved the church. Christ laid down his life for the church. And I think that there's so much in what Jesus did that is a depiction of what a man should be, is that we ought to be like Christ. We ought to act like Christ. Because ultimately, if we don't, then I think we're kind of failing at what that means. What it means to be a man.
Yeah, there's a um, I think many men maybe think that fear um, is something I don't know. We men don't like being afraid,
Hmm.
and so frequently we avoid things that make us afraid. But I do I think you're right, and I think what Paul Washer was getting at there is exactly right. That there's most of the best things in the world um, have risks,
Hmm.
and and the older you are and the more aware you are of the world, the more you are aware of risks. There's you realize, but without the risk, there's no glory. And so God made men. I like to say, one of the first words out of a little boy's mouth, right after maybe dad and ball, are watch this.
Yeah.
And so like a little boy, like, you don't have to teach him those words. Like, he, like, learns pretty quickly, like, "Watch this, mom, watch this, dad."
Yeah.
And and there's that instinct, I think, is still in every man, because
Yeah.
God made men, to want glory. We want greatness. But what happens is, because of our sinfulness, because of our flesh, we want glory on the cheap. We want the dollar store knockoff glory.
The Johnny
Um,
Knoxville.
yeah, yeah,
Watch this.
yeah, but we want it to look like we did something great
Hmm.
when we actually did the shortcut, rather than actually suffering, rather than actually laying our lives down, rather than actually going through the hard thing, the difficult thing, the dangerous thing, the terrifying thing, and enduring it. Um,
Yeah.
and and so I think there's a number of people that have probably said something like this, but courage is not the absence of fear. um, uh, Courage is doing your duty in the middle of fear.
Hmm.
um, Courage is doing what is right despite how you feel. And that's a particular glory of men, is to recognize this is what I'm called to do. And you're right, it's driven by love. It's driven by the love of your people, the love of what is right, the love of what is true. And then it's doing the best that you can to stand up for it, to do what you know is right and best, despite the fact that it doesn't feel good, and despite the fact that it feels terrible, or it's terrifying, or you're not doing a great job, and you're not doing a great job.
Hmm.
Many men give up. Many men despair. Many men go limp, rather than pressing on in the midst of really difficult circumstances. But you don't get the glory if you don't endure, if you're not steadfast,
Yeah.
even when you don't know the answer, even when you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. But when you know, okay, I have a duty here, I'm called to this. Um, I, the faithful men say, okay, this is my assignment. I'm supposed to stay here. I'm supposed to stand here and keep doing the best that I can in this circumstance. The promise of God is that He blesses that. He blesses that kind of patient endurance from men, and that's why there's the repeated exhortations: don't grow weary in doing good. Uh, don't don't grow weary in laying your life down day in and day out. Don't grow weary in that, because in due time you will reap a great harvest.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned, even when you feel like you're not doing a good job. And I don't know if it's, I'm sure it's not just me, but, as a father, um, I, I can't help but think there's a lot of times where I'm like, like, I just feel like I'm not doing a great job, like I'm, um, there's like a lot of guys at, I don't know, work or whatever, and they'll talk about all of these sports schedules, and how they're on the run all the time. Like, oh yeah, my kid plays on this team and this team, and they're on a traveling team, and they're doing all these things, and keeping them super active. And I just think sometimes, like, man, like my kids, they're active and they play sports, but we're we don't have them signed up in every single league, and traveling around, and with some crazy busy schedule. And there's times where I wonder, I'm like, am I failing as a father because I don't have them involved in so many different things? But then when I reel it back in, I think, like, what that person isn't doing though is they're not teaching their kid about Jesus. Like, they're not teaching their kid about what truth actually is, and where truth actually comes from, and who created them, and to have a relationship with the creator of the universe. And I it's like when I come back to that realization, like, yeah, they're not super involved in every single thing that I could possibly have them involved in, but we did our catechisms tonight, like, it I don't know, it kind of reels me back in. It makes me feel a little bit better. But not to say that I shouldn't, obviously they should be involved in something, keeping them active, and keeping them outside, and doing those things. But I guess what I'm saying is, it's super easy to get down on yourself, as a parent, because you can look at so many different things, and you can look at so many different families and parents and everything that all of their kids are doing, and you start comparing yourself with them. And I think that kind of gets into, the 10 commandments and not coveting, because it kind of runs the risk of doing that, because when you start doing that, you start self-loathing and feeling bad about, what you're doing.
Yeah,
um but yeah, when me and my wife talk, and we're like, but they're learning about the Lord, like, and we're doing all that we can to make sure that that's where we're starting, and anything extra that comes is good. But as long as that's our grounding, then we need to start there, because I don't care if they play in a baseball team, and we get home from school, and I'm like, all right, get your things together, let's go to the baseball field. Then we get home super late, they take a shower, and then there's no time to even talk about the day, no time to connect, there's no time to talk about or do catechisms, things like that. It's like, I I think it's more important, to be able to make sure that we're sticking to that, and instead of all these extracurriculars, which um, I think that's just kind of an American thing. We just stay super busy. We're just very on the go
yeah,
constantly.
yeah,
Like people eating breakfast in their car. Like, you drive past somebody and you see them like spooning cereal into their face because they didn't wake up in enough time to actually cook breakfast. But
right.
yeah, I think that all just kind of goes into what um yeah, just at least the one point that you made, it made me think of that. um but yeah, I think our culture, when it comes to manhood, is it's sort of an external facade. It's a it's kind of it's more about how they look. Do I have like the gym muscles? Do I look tough? Do I am I able to conquest, sexually, through as many women as I want, and all these different, just kind of, I guess, machismo ideologies. And I think personally that is like the exact opposite of what a man should be. I think that a real man would make sure that he's actually protecting women, and not allowing for that type of behavior to go on, at least in his own life, with some sort of self discipline. And like, so what do you think? Why do you think we've gotten so far away from, we were talking about starting with the Bible, as far as,
Yeah,
how, who we are, and how we should be, and how we should act as people in general, but as men, and we've gotten so far from that. And what do you think is um the driving force behind that?
yeah. Well, um,
It's a
the
loaded
the sh-
question, but
the short and cheap, cheating answer is, well, sin.
yeah.
Um,
Right,
but
yeah,
but I assume you want more than that. Um, I but I do think it goes back. I mean, again, go back to the garden, and in the very next chapter, God creates the woman, and then the very next chapter, you've got the temptation scene and the fall into sin,
yeah. Hmm.
and it's right from jump. There's always been this temptation for men to abdicate their responsibility, and because it's hard, because to take responsibility, to be the leader, um, is hard. It's difficult. It's painful. It doesn't always go well, and so
Yeah,
there's this constant temptation to not take responsibility, and and abdicating authority, abdicating leadership. And what happens? That's exactly what happens in the garden. The woman is tempted. The woman is deceived by the serpent, and she turns and offers the fruit to her husband, and and so what you see there in that moment is a microcosm of, I think, what happens over and over again to the human race, which is that men um, they do not take their responsibility, they do not retain their authority, their leadership for the good of their people, and instead they are enticed and often by their lusts. And I believe that pleasure is often the bribe that is paid men um, to basically castrate themselves.
Mm.
It comes in the form of sex. It comes in the form of um, uh, drugs, alcohol. It comes in the form of again sort of cheap highs, maybe video games or other escapes, fantasy of various sorts that where again I would describe it all as it's knockoff glory. um, Look, you can have this harem of porn. You're like a Solomon. You can flip through whatever, however many wives and concubines as you want on, whatever, Triple X or, Pornhub
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but it's like the offer is, hey, you're a king. You're a
Yeah.
prince, you're nobility. But of course, it's fake, it's false because none of those women know your name, and none of those women care about you at all. They're
Right.
making money off of your lust,
Yeah.
and you're giving your strength away. And that's exactly what Proverbs 31, actually, the beginning of Proverbs 31 says. It says one of the end there is written by King Lemuel, and King Lemuel says that his mother taught him, um, "Do not give your strength to women, and your ways to those patterns of life that destroy kings."
Mm.
And she lists and then begins talking. The first instance I think is talking about sexual sin, and then right after that starts talking about um, booze, basically, intoxicating drink. But she's pointing out, that's booze and babes are kind of the two big um, sins and downfalls of men,
Mm.
and I would say maybe a close third is frequently um, maybe men don't give in full tilt to those sins, but frequently men, the bribe that they're willing to take is just don't give me any trouble.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you can have this mediocre man who maybe isn't constantly indulging his lust and isn't drinking too much all the time, but basically refuses to lead in his family or lead his wife or lead his kids because he knows that if he actually did that there would be pushback.
Mm.
They, there,
Yeah.
there would there would
Yeah.
be questions, there would be criticisms. It wouldn't be easy. And so he just says, "Look, I'll leave you alone. I'll go to work. I'll pay the bills. You can do what you want to do, and just leave me alone."
Mm.
And so the pleasure that he's being bribed with is just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Um, and but all of those things are still like you are abdicating your authority, and
Yeah.
and Adam, didn't have any other women to sleep with and didn't apparently have any booze yet in the garden, but was unwilling to lead and protect his wife in that moment when Eve offered him the fruit, when Eve is listening to the serpent. Um, Whatever was going through his head, whatever happened there, he abdicated his authority. He refused to lead. He refused to protect his wife and his posterity, and listened to the voice of his wife, and in so doing, gave his strength away to a
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah.
Um,
Well.
and so I would say that's the perennial temptation, and you see it over and over again. Abraham is promised a seed, and rather than believing God, Sarah says, "Hey, take my concubine Hagar." Abraham listens to the voice of his wife. You see it later in the era of the judges. One of the most famous ones being Samson, who literally is loses his strength
Yeah.
because he gives it away to a woman. Um, Solomon, the wisest man, the greatest of the
Mhm.
kings of the East at that time, um, it gives his strength away to all these wives and all these concubines who no doubt he was thinking to himself, this is, they were political treaties, and he was making treaties with all the nations, This is what I have to do. This is what all the nations do, and they turned his heart away from the Lord, um, and it created all kinds of trouble for Israel. I would say that's the center. That's the centerpiece of our sin as men. Is we are willingly bribed by pleasure, either the
Mm,
pleasure of sex, the pleasure of food, drink, what, or just the pleasure of leave me alone.
mm.
um, and we are bribed, and we give away our strength, we give away our authority, um, and the price of it is for the porridge of um, momentary pleasure.
Yeah, that makes me think. You talking about Adam, just kind of succumbing to the temptation of taking the the food. It brings me. It kind of a verse that I go to a lot, and that's First Timothy 5:8. It says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." And I just feel like that passage is so it's just so packed. It's like one of those it's one of those passages where a pastor could read that and then give a whole sermon on just one verse, because
Oh yeah.
there's just so much there. It's like to provide. Like, what does that mean, right? It doesn't. I think a lot of men in our culture just think that means that I woke up at 5 today and I went to work and I made a paycheck and I'm providing, right? But they're not they're not thinking about in so how many other ways do they need to be able to provide? They need to be able to provide for their kids by being a strong example of a hard worker, but also being there for their kids when their kids emotionally need them, and being there for their wife when their wife emotionally needs them, and being able to show them discipline and just in raising their kids. And I mean, there's so many different things. And you kind of brought up, like, the porn issue, and obviously that's a huge issue with men, and that's it, I think that goes back to discipline. It goes back to discipline in general. That, for instance, my kids, they always want a snack or they always want candy or whatever, because they're 6 and 8, and that's what kids do, and that's what that's what they
Mhm.
always want is ice cream and candy. Um, but I think that if we start with our kids at a young age being disciplined in multiple areas, like, being disciplined to, like, my kids, for example, they like to come home from school and they'll get changed and they'll just like throw their clothes on the floor. And I'm like, wait, like, what are you doing? Hold on. Where do your clothes go? They don't go on the floor. They go in your hamper, or, if it's a sweater or something, it gets hung up or whatever it is. And just those little examples of discipline, I think, just plays a bigger part in their life, because as they get older and they start to have hormones and go through puberty and all these other things, and then they start realizing that they're attracted to women, and then bam, porn comes out of nowhere. Um, if we're able to teach our kids to be disciplined in what they consume, what they eat, hey, one piece of candy today, you don't need your whole bag of Halloween candy or whatever it is. Um, that's teaching them to be disciplined in multiple areas. And I think that discipline will carry over when they are tempted with these bigger addictive, yeah, just things in our culture, like alcoholism and drugs and porn. If you teach them to be disciplined and taking care of themselves, being strong and working out, taking care of their bodies, then I think that those things will translate into later on in life when their friend wants to tempt them with weed or whatever. They're like, well, I've been disciplined my whole life. Like, and I'm going to be disciplined now because that's just been like wrought into my being.
One of the things that I think you're absolutely right. So self discipline, self government is a translatable skill, and
Mm.
particularly for men, we're relatively simple creatures, um, and so we have appetites and desires, and basically, if you train those appetites and desires, your will, your spirit, um, it's a translatable skill, and so you're absolutely right, and the thing that I think that a lot of good well-meaning men maybe forget in the process is that at the same time, again, we are wired by God for glory.
Mhm.
And the thing that sometimes I think good, well-meaning Christian dads forget is that. And so I think one of the ways, so there's warnings in Ephesians and in Colossians, fathers, don't exasperate your children. Don't provoke them to wrath. Don't provoke them to anger. And I think one of the ways that fathers sometimes do that is by forgetting to reward the self-discipline, forgetting to delight in the obedience. And so I think sometimes we just say, one piece of candy, don't be an idiot, and that's enough ice cream, stop it. And but we have to remember that they don't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're only 6 or they're only 9,
Mhm.
they're only 3, and they don't connect all the dots that we do. We
Yeah.
we know, you know 10 pieces of candy now, and and all the ice cream you want now, and when
Yeah.
you're 13 and when you're 16, you won't have any breaks to say no to anything.
Right.
Um, eh,
Yeah.
but but what we want, and obviously we can start to explain that to them as they're younger. But I think two things would be really really key is as we're teaching them that self control and that self government. Number one is dads need to spend a lot of time praising their kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to speak out loud how proud they are of them.
Yeah.
And it should just be randomly. I'm so pleased with you. I love you. You're so strong. You're so brave. I love how you got that done. I love how you did the chores. I love how you said yes, ma'am, to your mom. I love how you ate all your food. Um, we are we should be. This is the one thing we see about our Father in heaven. When the one direct thing we have about God the Father in the Gospels is he shows up, and the one thing that he wants to say is, "This is my son,
Mm.
in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him." And that's what he says at the baptism of Jesus, and then it's what he says at the transfiguration of Jesus. It's the only direct words of the Father.
Yeah.
So, like, what do we know about God the Father? He is well pleased.
Mm.
He is so proud of his son. And so if we're to model that as men and as fathers to our own kids, those should be some of the most common words our kids hear out of our mouths. Well done. Way to go. That was awesome. High fives. Give me a
Mm.
pound. Did you all see that? I mean, talk about it. I mean, that's what the Father says to everybody at the baptism of Jesus. Did you all know this is my son?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, proud dad
Yeah.
should be one of the most common things, and then with that would just be and then tangible reward. We live in a world in which God rewards hard work. In the beginning, in a sinless world, God says, "I want you to take dominion of this whole world," and then says, "Now, Adam, there's a river that's running out of this garden, and it splits into four, and down the first leg of that river, there's gold. It's really good gold." Like from the
Yeah.
beginning, in a perfect world, God says, He doesn't just say, "Adam, be good, because I said so." He could have.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
Right. Right.
he says, "Look, I made you." And I always like to point out the very first thing God tells Adam in Genesis is the menu, the food.
Mm.
That's the first thing he tells him. Why? Because men are always hungry. Men are always hungry from the beginning. Sinless
Yeah.
man. He's like, "Adam, I know what you're thinking. You're hungry. Here."
Yeah.
And he filled this garden with food. He says, "There's food. This whole garden is full of good food, and it's all yours." there's one tree over here, that's a no. Everything else in the garden is a yes. Everything else in the garden is good food for you. Enjoy it. I know you're hungry. Have at it. And then he says, and you've got a big job, and you're going to fill this whole world with my glory. And a little ways down this river, there's this amazing stuff called gold. It's really good gold. You're going to want to get a lot of it. But what that tells me is that God the Father, there's two striking characteristics. One is that he is well pleased. He's easy to please. He loves his son. He loves his people. He loves his children. And so we should be like that, easy to please.
Mm.
And then secondly, full of good gifts, full like rewards, treasure. That's what it says in James 1 as well. It says that every good and every perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights,
Yeah.
in whom there is no variation or shadow of change. The thing that James says we ought to know about our Father is that he doesn't change. He's permanently good, and every good and every perfect gift comes from him. He's a gift giver. He's a rewarder. Romans 2 says he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So I would say you're absolutely right. Teach self-discipline, teach
Yeah.
self-control, teach self-government. Absolutely. But the thing that I would say is do that in the context of being very, very happy with your kids,
Mm-hmm.
being very overjoyed, easily pleased,
Yeah.
praising them, and then lots of gifts. Little things. I mean, I when my kids were little, it was when there was something good accomplished. Maybe it was just a milkshake, or maybe it was a little race car from Walmart, or
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it was a special trip with dad. Maybe it was high fives and a little, and a happy wrestle, just to show
Mm-hmm.
them, like, I'm so pleased with you. You're such a cool guy. I love you.
Mm-hmm.
It's there, but I would just say those would be the things that teach self-discipline, teach self-government, but teach it in the context of lots of praise and lots of gifts,
Yeah.
so that you're feeding that. And even if they don't fully understand why it matters, it's a joyful atmosphere, not a harsh one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's easy to like fall into that, speaking of like discipline, kind of like falling into that like militant, almost drill sergeant kind of mindset.
Right.
Um, because you just think in your head like, I gotta teach them to be tough, and this is how we do that. This is we're
Yeah.
we're really we're really tough on them. And I think it's easy to like fall into that trap.
When
Um,
when my uh when my boys were little, it just reminded me, as you were saying, be tough. I
mhm,
when they were really little, when they were like 1 or 2 years old, in order so that boys fall down and they
yeah,
hurt themselves or get hurt all
yeah,
the
yeah.
time.
Oh
And
yeah,
so one of the things that we would do with our boys, was, if they fell down and they were crying, we'd comfort them real quickly, just for a
yep,
second,
yep, yep.
and we would say to them, "Show me tough."
Yeah, I've
And
done that too.
and
Like a
but
similar thing.
yeah, but what they had to do was what they did for us is they had to flex their muscles and
Uh,
growl.
uh,
So they would go, "Grr," and it, kinda helped them work through the pain a little bit too, but, and
yeah,
sometimes, they're doing it through, tears, but,
hmm,
"All right, show me tough. You can do it. You can do it." And then
yeah,
once they did it and they held it together and they pulled it together, you say, "Way to go. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." And in that moment, they're both learning self-control and self-government, but
hmm,
also having the glory of having done it in a small way. It's like, "I'm so proud of you. Way to go. You're so strong."
yeah,
Um, and so it's tough, but it's joyful tough. It's
yeah, yeah,
tough, but it's like I'm a coach, and I'm showing them how to be tough, and then I'm cheering them on, and I'm encouraging them as they actually accomplish it.
yeah. No, yeah, that's awesome. That's maybe I'll steal the the flexing and growling
Do
thing
it.
'cause
Do it.
that sounds cool. I know my younger one would he would love that because he falls a lot. So
Mm,
he's like the
eh,
most clumsy kid in the world. He's always getting hurt.
Yeah.
he'll be sitting in a chair just totally still, and somehow like Peter
Yep.
Griffin fall out of it, and I don't understand how he does it,
Yep.
but it's
Yep.
kind of funny, but
Yep.
ends up
Yep.
ends up hurting himself. But I think one of my favorite things about like doing this doing this podcast is just being able to um just being able to learn from people that are so much more wise and smarter than I am. So many, it's just it's always a blessing every time I talk to somebody. It's just so many cool things that we get into, and yeah, like a lot of what you said was reminding me of like the iron sharpening iron, in Proverbs like 27. It says iron sharpened iron, and one man sharpens another, and so it's like our boys, our kids, they need that, and I think a lot of what you were saying is a way to sharpen them, to build them up, but also I think that men in general, need other men. Yeah, they need other men to be able to work through the difficulties of life. When we lose a loved one, or when the bills are hard to pay, or just depression and anger and dealing with sin, dealing with like if you're a guy who struggles with porn and things like that. And I think that it's like just kind of going back to our culture. We're just so individualistic. We have this mindset, this kind of again that machismo, sorry, mindset, where you're kind of you have this I think destructive pride. Like I don't need anybody else. I have me, and I need to just work through it myself. I don't need anybody to help me through this. I don't need any kind of wisdom or um, direction. And I think that's what leads us to that, quote unquote, toxic masculinity. I think that that's what leads down that road, is thinking that we're strong enough to do it on our own. And I think that there is just, blessing really in the idea that we're not strong enough, and that it kind of goes back to the gospel. Like we're not good enough. We're not strong enough. We can't do it on our own. There's nothing that I'm going to be able to do to get myself into heaven. And if we apply that to being a man, like I'm not strong enough. Life can be hard. There's challenges. It's tough when we lose loved ones. It's tough when people are sick. And I think it's this again, this kind of fake outer facade that we put on, that we're okay and we're working through things, when really internally we're just being ripped apart, and we just think that we can't go to anybody because our culture is going to think that we're weak, or that we're not real men, because we can't just internalize everything, and and just basically slowly die.
Mhm.
Is kind of
Yeah.
how I think of it. But
Yeah, I would like to tell guys that, I think um, there is a a healthy instinct in
mm,
men, to want to carry things themselves,
mhm,
because we know that instinctively we're made to lead, which means we're meant to carry heavy things.
sure.
And our glory is our strength, and so that means using our strength. And so I think there's a healthy instinct that says, I need to carry this. I need to
Yeah.
bear this. And so, and then I think what happens though is you're right. But that doesn't mean you're a lone ranger. It doesn't
Right.
mean that you have no community. It doesn't mean you have no friends.
Mhm.
And that's where the individualism comes in. And
Yeah.
so, but I think sometimes it's sort of, they know they're supposed to carry things, and then you've got individualism saying, yeah, don't ever ask for help. um, and I think no, the Christian answer, the answer of the gospel is that yes, you are a man, and that means you were made to carry heavy things.
Mhm.
And so that's true.
Yeah.
but because of sin and because of our weakness and our brokenness, you can't carry it all by yourself.
Right.
And
Right.
so you need, number one, you need a savior.
Yeah.
You need you've got your own sins that you need to deal with, your own failures you need to deal with, and you can't deal with them. You
Right.
can't deal with your own sin. You need a sacrifice for your sin. Um, and there's no amount of good works or sacrifices that you can make to atone for your own sin. And so that you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. So the gospel comes and Christ says, I'll be that sacrifice. And in doing so, he says, I will take that sin, I will take that guilt away. And the thing that some men don't understand is that that's not, and sometimes Christians even talk this way in a weird kind of way. This is not in order to then um, reduce your manhood.
Right.
This is not then to like and people just say, some people talk this way though. It's like, you need to just completely give up all your strength. You need to just give it all up, lay it all down, no burdens at all.
Yeah.
No, no.
Like
What
lean into those things,
Yeah,
and
no, no.
use.
What Christ does is he takes away the guilt and the sin
Yeah.
so that you can be the man you're called to be.
Right.
He,
Right.
he takes
Right.
away the guilt and the sin so that you can carry the things that
Yeah.
God has called you to carry, and your wife and your kids and your family need you to carry. Um,
Yeah.
you are needed as a man. The problem is that it's like, your sin is like your in Hebrews at 12 it says that we need to um, um, put off the sin that so easily entangles us and
Mm.
run the race that was set before us, looking unto Christ, the author and finisher of our faith. But
Yeah.
think of sin then, it's like having your legs tied together, and your job is, you've got this backpack full of burdens from, maybe, difficulties in your family, health issues, spiritual challenges, friends, family, all those burdens, and your legs are tied together.
Yeah.
Well, Christ comes to free your legs. Christ comes to set you free so that you can be a man, so that you can carry the burdens that God has assigned to you. And then the other thing is that there is also a general sense in which every faithful man, every strong man who is carrying great burdens for the good of his family is only able to do that by constantly casting his cares on Christ,
Yeah.
which is this got to be the center of it. We do need other good men,
Yeah.
but every man fundamentally needs one good man, Christ.
Yeah. Right. The
And
only actual real
yeah,
man who
yeah,
has
the only perfectly
have
good
ever
man.
lived. Yeah.
but he is so good that as you trust in him, as you cast your cares on him, as you ask him for help, as you tell him all of the things that are burdening you, that are weighing you down, um, he takes those burdens and he bears them. He carries them for you and with you, and enables you to carry the burdens. Sometimes I warn guys. There's a sometimes guys um, dump on their wives,
Mm.
and I say, you need to know, and some Christians encourage this. They encourage guys, just be transparent with your wife. Tell your wife everything that's hurting you and burdening you. And I say, that's probably not a great idea. Um, your wife obviously should know, what is hard in your life. Your wife should be aware of the
Yeah.
challenges that you face,
Yeah.
but you're um a man could go home at the end of the day, and I describe it as sort of emotional puking. A man could go
Yeah.
home and like emotionally puke on his wife,
He was like venting to her. Yeah.
venting,
Yeah.
and just, all the things that were hard that day. And then
Yeah.
a man will just like, oh, I feel better, and he'll just conk out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And now his wife is stressing and anxious because of
Hmm.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and she's not made to bear that burden, and she's not called to.
Yeah.
And so now having a good male friend, a pastor or a bud, that you can, go out and have a beer and say, "Hey, this has been pretty hard. This has been pretty challenging."
Right.
And that guy will be like, "Hey, yeah, try this, try that. I'll be praying for you." And that guy will go home and he'll just conk out.
Yeah,
He,
yeah, yeah, right. He's
because
kinda
guys we have drawers that we put stuff in, and we put it in okay, that's that's my buddy Mark drawer, and close it, and then next time I see Mark, I'll ask him how it's going. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but women are not made that way, and but I would say the centerpiece of it all needs to be cast your cares on Christ. He cares for you. Believe that he cares for you. Make sure that
Mhm.
all your sin is dealt with. Every time you have unconfessed sin, it's like your legs are getting tangled up, and no wonder you're having trouble carrying all the burdens. But if you confess your sins, he is faithful and just to forgive you and cleanse you from all unrighteousness. And confess your sin to God, confess your sin to whoever you've sinned against. Get clean, get your legs free, and you'll find that even though life has some very, very heavy burdens, um, a man who's forgiven, a man who is walking in the light as God is in the light, um, God enables you to carry the burdens that He's assigned to you,
Mhm.
you can be humanly strong enough for those burdens, but only in Christ.
Yeah.
Only because you're forgiven, only because you're walking in the light, only because you're casting your cares on Him, knowing that He cares for you.
Yeah. Yeah, what you you were talking about, guys dumping on their wives, it made me think of so there's a guy at my old church, and he was telling this story. He used to be in construction. Now he's in full-time ministry, but he was in construction for a while, and that's kind of similar to the job that I have. So it's like it can be a pretty kind of rough environment, a lot of times. And it's not the most edifying place in the world, I guess, if if
Yeah,
if that's the word to use. But yeah, he was talking about um this guy who was just, I guess, crapping all over his wife and just talking about all the issues that he had with her, and whatever. And and it just kind of brings me to my point that part of being a man is just being bold and saying what needs to be said. And he said he said to the guy, I guess he was just getting fed up to the point where he was just like, "Hey, you want a better wife, be a better husband." And it's
yeah,
one of those like kind of like that meme with all the guys standing around like, "Oh," like
yeah,
mic drop moment. And
uh,
it just stuck with me, and it kind of like it was an encouragement for me to be a better husband. Not that I like felt in that moment that I was like the guy that was crapping all over his wife, but at the same time I was like it just, it's just like struck a chord, like, I could be a better husband, and I think everybody should strive for that. I think everybody could be a better husband, but um
yeah. Well,
y-
the Bible says that. I mean, she is your body.
yeah, right.
She is your body, which means she is a reflection of you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
if you're if she's not thriving, if she's not lovely, if she's not sweet, if she's not gracious, well, whose problem is that fundamentally? That's your problem.
Yeah,
You're
like foundational. Yeah, that's
Yeah, right. You're responsible.
yeah.
And she is your body. And he says, no man ever hated his own flesh, but
Yeah.
nourishes and cherishes it. I mean,
Yeah.
he says, but if you're, um, if you haven't taken care of your body, I mean, if you're, a fat slob and you're not taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
whose fault is that? Well, that's our own fault.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true of, your wife is your crown
Mhm.
and your glory. And if you're not shepherding her, if you're not pursuing her, if you're not correcting her, if you're not bringing her along and leading her, well, that's obviously she's an individual responsible to God, but you're responsible for her um, as her husband, and that's absolutely true. You're on the hook.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely it's an important point, I think. I think maybe that should be read more at weddings than than the typical, love is kind, love is patient, love is kind. Um,
Yep. Yep.
Not to say that's bad. Read that too. Maybe throw that other one in there too, though, because I think
Absolutely.
these are
Amen.
these are important things to talk about that we just you don't think about. There's so many things that go into being a man, being a husband, and that kind of brings me to thinking about just overall like protecting women. Like we men are created in a way that we're bigger and stronger than women.
That's right.
If men are left unchecked and we completely deny Christ and we're just handed completely over to our own sinful desires, then women are in danger.
Right.
Like they're not protected. What's stopping a man from just impregnating a woman and walking away? It's like they have the ability to do that physically, and if they don't love Jesus, then there's really nothing morally stopping them from doing it. And I think that kind of goes into kind of this like feminist movement, that it's basically they're like fighting against men in traditional roles, but it's because they are not starting again. They're not starting with God's word. They're not starting with what did God say, because God created men for a specific role, and in that specific role, it is to be the bigger, stronger man, and to the dominion mandate, and to rule and reign over all things, and to be able to protect women. I mean, I think I don't. It's just like one of them things. I don't think that many women in that movement think about. I don't think that they think about like the ramifications of what pure feminism would mean for them.
Right.
Is
It,
like a complete collapse of society, and
right.
and no protection for them.
It, um, George Gilder has a great book called Men in Marriage,
Mm,
um, that it does a great job of walking through this. It was written in the early 80s, 1980s. Um,
what's that
and
called? I'm gonna look it up.
it's called Men and Marriage,
Men.
by George Gilder. Um, George Gilder wrote the book. Um, he's an economist,
Mm,
um, but wrote the book. I think there was an early edition in the late 70s called Sexual Suicide,
oh, okay.
and then revised it in the 80s to Men in Marriage. And Canon Press actually has a new version out of it,
Okay.
in the last like year or two. Um, and but it's not. He was, I think, when he wrote the book, he was actually in the process of becoming a Christian.
Ah,
So
okay. He's in
so
between.
yeah, so he's a little bit in between, and so it's not a really explicitly theological book. It's
Mm,
more of a just sociological study, or economic study, political study, cultural study. But
sure.
he's making that very point that
Yeah, yeah.
feminism is cultural suicide, um,
Eh,
and does a pretty remarkable job of outlining all the ways in which he sees the calling of traditional masculinity and patriarchy, basically,
yeah.
um, as um, as the root of cultural stability. And
Right, yeah,
that's
it's
when men are bound by cultural expectations to be faithful to one woman, and to lead and protect her, everything is blessed.
mm,
And
mhm,
but when a society rejects that, you are doing exactly what you said. You're basically unmooring this power that God's put in men, and rather than it being disciplined for good and aimed at productivity, building things, creating things, inventing things for the good of our families,
right.
it turns into basically gangs and chaos and anarchy, that
Christ or
ultimately,
chaos, right?
yeah, that just destroys civilizations, destroys families. So, anyways, highly recommend Men in Marriage by George Gilder. He describes the phenomenon in pretty exquisite detail.
Yeah, but yeah, I just looked it up, so I'm gonna bookmark that, add it to the never-ending list of books to
Yeah,
read. But maybe
good.
I'll move that one up because that sounds like it's pretty good. But yeah, I think that the word patriarchy, it just carries such a negative connotation, in our culture. It's this like boogeyman that nobody wants to really address or talk about. And I think also that it's misrepresented. It's not talked about in the biblical sense in just in the way that it's actually a really beautiful thing
Right,
for women, for children, for society, for everything. I mean,
right,
it's yeah, and that's like a totally, that could be a complete episode of its own.
right,
But
right,
but yeah, when you remove like the protections from women, then you have all of these just I'm trying to kind of like reel it in, but we were talking about this, me and a guy at work, and he was talking about how um in most cities a lot of democratic policies have been basically placed there to dismantle the nuclear family and to keep women single so that they have to constantly be reliant on the government for assistance and for being able to pay their bills and being able to eat.
right,
And it's like so antithetical to what God's design is.
right,
It's like no, nuclear family, the man is there, he's providing, he's protecting. Um, And yeah, I think we would have a lot less issues with um, y- girls feeling like they have nowhere else to go but to be a pole dancer or to shoot porn or these types of things. I remember seeing a shirt. It was at I don't know if you're familiar with Cornerstone Festival. I mean, it's not a thing anymore, but it used to be in
yeah,
Illinois. And I was out there, and this was years ago. I mean, uh, this had to have been like 2010 maybe. And I still remember this shirt. It was a shirt, and it was talking about it was basically it was like an anti-pornography shirt, and it said that remember every time that you watch porn, you're watching somebody's daughter. A- And for whatever reason, that just struck a chord,
yeah,
and I'm just like I start thinking about you know all of the women that I know, and then their fathers and their relationship with one
yeah,
another. And then as I get older and I start having kids, and you start thinking about these things in a completely different mindset, like yeah, it's like it's disgusting. It's somebody's daughter who is loved, and in a lot of instances, yeah, there's like some brokenness in the family, and that's typically what leads to that. But it's God's daughter, and it's a woman who is made in the image of God,
right,
and we're just treating it as a product.
right,
We just have to. It's like we have to test drive it. Like people say that all the time, talking about sex before marriage. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that. Like, well, you have to test drive the car, and I'm like, ugh, like
yeah,
it just, man, it's like I know I shouldn't want to, but I wanna punch you.
yeah,
It's like, what do you mean, man? Like, are we comparing an actual woman with value and dignity to, a vehicle? Like, are we
right,
doing that right now? Is
right,
that where we're going?
yeah,
Um, but yeah, all that to say, patriarchy is a good thing. So,
yeah.
um,
What another book plug? I don't know if you've read Man of the House by C.R. Wiley. but
No, I haven't,
uh,
but I'm gonna I'm gonna bookmark that one too.
that would be another recommend would be, Man of the House, and he touches on a fair bit of what you're talking about as well, where just the way that, feminism has tricked men and women into, abandoning the nuclear family. But in so doing, it's not like, you actually escape the shape of the world. All the statist solutions that you're pointing to, welfare and
Yeah.
so on, who's that being enforced by? Men with guns.
Yeah.
Like we still have a patriarchy. We still live in a
Yeah.
patriarchy.
Yeah, yeah.
Only now the patriarchy is run by government thugs.
Right,
Um,
instead of men who are actually willing to,
yes,
step in and
right,
provide and protect.
exactly.
Yeah, no, that's another one. I'm gonna go ahead and bookmark that too because that sounds like something up up that alley. But yeah, something you just said, I like totally lost my train of thought. It was like a point that I was thinking, but that's all right. Maybe it'll come to me at 2 in the morning when I'm trying to go to sleep. Like, oh yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to add to the discussion, but I try to be mindful of people's time. I don't want to
Yeah.
take up your whole day. I'm sure you're a busy man with all of the millions of things you have going on.
No, well, I appreciate you having me on, Mark. I'll since I've been giving book plugs, I'll give one more just for fun.
Sure.
Future Men by Douglas Wilson.
All right.
Uh,
Well, yeah, that's.
um,
I'm always a fan of.
is that's his book about raising boys.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, if you have George Gilder, Men in Marriage, Man of the House by C.R. Wiley, Future Men by Douglas Wilson, for everybody out there listening, watching, those would be my recommends for thinking about manhood, masculinity, fatherhood, and raising boys to be uh, tough, godly men,
Yeah.
which is what we need right now. So, but no, thanks very much, Mark, for having me on.
Yeah. No, for sure. Thank you for being on. Like I said, it's I never know who's going to respond or not respond, so it's always exciting when when people
Yeah,
are willing to come on and share their wisdom and their knowledge. And so, before we go, I know you mentioned it at the beginning of the episode, but if somebody's looking for your content, or I don't know if you YouTube channel, or I know your cross politic podcast, where could people find you if
yeah,
they're looking for more?
yeah. So, yeah, Cross Politic is crosspolitic.com. That's a Monday through Friday. We have shows, Christ over politics. So it's a political, cultural show. We're trying to apply God's word to the public square. So crosspolitic.com, you can find our shows there. We also have an app which you can download. Search Fight Laugh Feast on
Right.
your favorite app store. My website's tobyjsumpter.com, and I've got a blog there. I also have various things over at canonpress.com. There's a local publishing company, so a couple of books, and some various videos and seminars and things that I've done there, canonpress.com. Um, and I have a YouTube channel called Having Two Legs. Having Two Legs. I think if you search Having Two Legs, or maybe my name, I don't know how. I
I
don't
think
even
I
know how to
found it
get.
just by searching your name before, but
Okay, great. Okay,
yeah, either way.
Toby Sumpter, Having Two Legs. That's my YouTube channel, and you can check my stuff out there.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for being on. And brothers and sisters, go give a reason for the hope that is in you. Remember to do it lovingly and do it with reverence and respect. So we'll see you next time.